Hi there, this is Linda and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be putting together another Project Life spread, this time for the week of October 4th through October 7th, 2025, and documenting our visit to Barcelona, Spain. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, I'm going to start this one a little bit different because this is a travel spread and I've gotten lots of questions about how I include travel in Project Life. And I wanted to kind of share a little bit before the computer. I'm not going to share my computer process, partially because a lot of my photos have my boyfriend in them and I need to cover his face on the internet, but I've already done my photo editing for a trip. So kind of my process or my flow for a trip is while I'm on vacation, I journal. So I have my journal here and I shared some recently on YouTube or on Instagram about my journaling process. So here's my spreads from Barcelona. This is actually going to be, let me just change this, October 4th through 7th, which were the days we were in Barcelona. The 3rd was our travel day and I included that in the previous spread. So I have this day, and this day, this day, and this day. So while I'm traveling, I journal, I add photos, I add ephemera in here. And so I have a feel for like what happened and what stories I want to tell in my actual Project Life. When I get home from my trip, or well, as I'm on my way home, I tend to go through all of my photos, pick all of my favorites, and edit all of them. I use the Color Story app on my phone, and I just edit all of the photos using the same exact process. And I can share more about that in the description box below if you are interested. I do have a paid subscription to a Color Story. I don't know if the filters that I use are part of that paid subscription. I believe they are, but there's a lot of editing apps out there that you could use that are similar if you don't want to purchase one. For this spread, I have the back of this one, and then I have this pocket page, which has a flip out, which I thought would be neat because I could add some more vertical 3x4 cards in here and get a little bit more in my spread. I picked this one up from scrapbook.com and it gives me kind of that 12x12 space. And then because these fold down and they're on here, I'm going to use these as part of this spread as well. So I have like extra pages for Barcelona. So I think that that's great. And then for my actual products, I'm going to use the travel collection from Ali Edwards for 2025. So I have the travel collection in this huge tray here. This is everything that's left over. I'm using this collection for a travel album for my trip to Europe in 2024. And so I already kind of went through that, and I do have videos coming when I finally get around to putting that one together. But essentially what I did was I went through this collection and I pulled things out and put them in bags for that album. So these are the things that I specifically are saving for that album. I also have the digital collection, so I might pull some pieces digitally to use either in this spread or in that album. But I wanted to pull those pieces for the album out first, and this is kind of what's left over to document this spread. So this is a huge tray. I'm gonna just put it right here for now. And my plan is to kind of go through and lay out what I want, and then I'm gonna move over to the computer and print things. So for embellishments, I do have this. So I'm just gonna pull that out. There are these little pockets. I don't love using these in Project Life because you could put them on the outside the page protector, but honestly, I don't love these little pockets. I know a lot of people like these, which is why they keep making them, but they're not my favorite embellishment. And then let's see, let's go through the cards first. So I have this vellum one, which I think this is super cute. I probably want to use that. Then there were like these 4x6 ones. One of these might be good for like journaling. This is a good filler card. I've got these ones, and then there's these. I love that transparency. That's super cute. And that might be fun to kind of put on the front and back. So the next one, we are flying from Barcelona to Marrakesh, which is gonna go on the back. So I kind of like the idea of putting just like this as a transparent piece here, or one of these is a transparent piece that you can see through on the back side for Marrakesh. So like maybe this one, I'm not sure though. Maybe I'll do it on one of the other spreads because I do like that idea, but I think I'm gonna have a lot to include here. So let's see. I've got this one. So those are all the transparent pieces. And I've got these vellum ones. This one's cute. And then there's these like trip highs, trip lows, trip stuff, and trip memories. So I do want one for like my journaling. I'm thinking maybe I'll use like this trip memories. Before I came over here, I did look on my computer briefly to figure out kind of what my photos are, and they're almost all vertical orientation, which is pretty standard for me because I do share a lot on Instagram stories. So I also have these ones, and then this details from this adventure. These ones I also really love. So I'm thinking, let's see, let's bring my journal back. I've got so much stuff all over the place. So we had 4 days. And so the first day was kind of just like walking around. We were super sleep deprived. We just saw a few of the Gaudi houses. Second day we did Port Gael, Tibidabo, Paella. Third day was Sagrada Familia and tapas. And fourth day was the Gothic Quarter and Montjuice. So I could just kind of do bullet points on there. I'm trying to decide if I want to do like longer journaling about it. I'm not sure because I could just do a bullet point list of the things that we saw here and let the rest of the spread be like decoration and photos, because I do have a lot of photos. I do want to create like a title card that says where we went. So I'm thinking maybe I will cut like like this one down and then add my dates on here and then write Barcelona on there, maybe with the stickers. So let me think about that. I'm just gonna go ahead and do that because I know that's what I want to do for my title card. When I do these travel spreads, I always like to put the name of where we went in pretty large letters. So I think I'm gonna do Barcelona on there, probably with the alphas from this kit. So I'll pull those out. And then I have this one for journaling about this. And then let's see here. I kind of want to use this as like, do like a flip up. Because I have the flip up, I can play with that as like a transparent element rather than doing a see-through to Marrakesh. Although, I feel like I could do that like that and this one. Because I'm wondering if I could put Marrakesh on the back of here and have it not really mess with this spread too much. I possibly could. And I know that's kind of getting ahead of myself because this is not my Marrakesh spread that I'm working on. And then we have all of these die cut pieces, which I think will be super fun. I've got these. And there are also like these large like globe ones. I'm not going to use this one because this is like the United States and South America, and we were in Europe, so, and Africa, so that doesn't make a ton of sense. And then there's like this one. I could also use these pieces if I wanted to break it up. So say I have too many photos and I don't want like all photos, I could use these in some of these to like highlight some of the photos. Okay, so I think this is kind of what I'm gonna do. So what I need to do from here now is figure out how many photos I need. So I need a 4x6s. Need 1, 2, 3. And then 3x4s. I need 1, 2, 3. And then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm just gonna write it like that. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is go over to my computer and select my photos and print them out, and then I will come back on here and get this one put together. Okay, so now I have my photos printed and cropped, which you did see at the very beginning of the video, but I am ready to kind of lay them out. I did want to talk a little bit more, so I started to kind of talk about how I document my travel, but essentially I document each trip 4 times, and that might seem excessive to some people, but to me, I feel like it allows me to really enjoy the most. I get the most out of the trip as possible, and also just not feel so pressured to like get it right in any specific spot. Hopefully that makes sense. But essentially the first way that I document travel is in my journal. And like I mentioned, I did this journaling while I was on the road, while I was in Barcelona. So I included a lot of ephemera and things in here and real-time thoughts about what we did. The second way is usually Project Life, which is what I'm working on now. So after, as I explained, I edited my photos. I went through my favorite photos from Barcelona to select what I want to include on this spread. So for me, I am thinking about, so obviously I have a lot of photos from the trip. So how do I narrow them down? Essentially is basically what I'm thinking about is what photos really stand out to me. I kind of want to represent each big thing that we did as much as possible. Of course, that's not always going to be something that we can do because sometimes you have just, you know, too many, if some things don't have that many photos, like the Gaudi houses, there's 3 of them. We stopped by all of them. We didn't tour any of them. We just went to the outside. I only put 1 photo because I wanted it to be represented, but essentially there wasn't really that much from it that needed, like the photos weren't my favorite, I guess is the way to put it. This was one of my favorite photos here. And let's see, I'm just kind of putting things, although I want something kind of cool there. Let's see. Just thinking about how I want these photos arranged as I talk. So the third way that I document my vacations is typically in my mini-me albums and my traditional scrapbook layouts. So I like to create traditional scrapbook layouts, and that is kind of how I focus on very specific stories from the trip. So sometimes it's going to be a favorite photo that I want to blow up large. Sometimes it's going to be just an overview of a destination, you know, maybe a list of my 5 favorite things from a city. And that's going to be how I kind of process the more specific stories. So to recap, the journaling is like in the moment. Project Life is an overview and including kind of my favorite photos, a photo to represent kind of each thing. Some of the photos like this one are like my favorites, and just kind of get an overall feel for the trip. The third one are those specific stories in my story albums. And then the last one is usually a standalone travel album. And that is where I do things in most detail. That's where I include my ephemera, or ephemera goes in my journal and in my standalone album. But I have those 4 different ways of documenting vacations because it makes it way more approachable to me. If I was only documenting this trip on Project Life, I would feel super overwhelmed because I have a lot of photos. Probably, you know what? I'm going to get those numbers for you. Okay, so for Barcelona, I have about 1,700 photos, and I know that sounds really excessive, but that is including the edited versions and all the photos my boyfriend took, all the photos I took. And I also took, you know, like photos of my journal and stuff while I was there that are not part of the trip. And then I had 298 photos that are edited. Some of those are duplicates because sometimes I edited like the stories version while I was traveling, and then I edited like the 3x4 version of the same photo later. But I have essentially almost 300 photos that are like good photos from Barcelona, and I had to narrow it down to 13 for this spread. So if this was the only way I was documenting this trip, I would feel very overwhelmed by that. But because it's not, and I am documenting this in multiple locations, I feel more comfortable on this spread just picking, you know, an overview, my favorite photos, my favorite memories, my favorite moments from the trip, and using that as a jumping off point to document this adventure. So now I'm going to kind of just, I guess at this point, what I'm going to do is kind of switch you guys to the voiceover. You can see I have a general layout here. I want to put some embellishments. I'm going to pull pieces from here, maybe some from my stash, but probably not. This is going to be mostly pretty simple. I'm just going to do a bullet point list here. I did a lot of journaling in here, and I will do longer detailed journaling on some of those traditional layouts and in my travel album, which honestly I probably won't put together for like a year. But for this one, I'm just going to do like a bullet point list of these are the things that we did while we were in Barcelona. And then I'm going to add a few embellishments and call this one good. So I'm going to go ahead and put you guys on voiceover and get this one put together.
Okay, so I'm going to start with my title card, which is usually where I start at this point in the process. I have one of the chipboard pieces from the travel collection, and I'm going to just use some rolling adhesive to adhere it down on this card and use my rolling date stamp to add the dates. I always put the dates on my title cards. I usually don't put anything else, but for travel spreads, I do like to put the name of the destination. Sometimes there'll be a quote or something else, but as far as titles, I don't really do those on my title cards other than the dates. I also don't put week numbers or anything like that. You might see on Instagram where I share the week number. That is just for Instagram sharing purposes, but I'm not following any set list of what the weeks are supposed to be. I've gotten questions from people that do very strict week numbers and wondering why my week numbers are off. It's because I do spreads like this where I went to Barcelona and I was there for 4 days. So that was a spread. It's not a week exactly Monday through Sunday. Instead, it's just a spread of what days I was there and, just however I felt like breaking up my spreads. There's no rules, right? So for my title for Barcelona, I'm using the alpha stickers, and I knew it was going to be a little tight to fit them on here, so I'm having to kind of balance them a little bit to get it to work. And then I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and stitch the letters down. I am just going to pull that thread through. So when I stitch something on my sewing machine, I pull the thread through the back, cut it off, and then I just use some Scotch tape to adhere it in place. And that just keeps it there. I don't worry about like stitching back and forth on the end like you would on fabric because I don't want to tear more holes in the paper. The travel collection had this tear apart sheet, I guess is what you would call it. These are like word phrase strip stickers, but they are perforated strips instead, so they're not adhesive. Instead, you just kind of fold them back and then tear them apart. I always cut it down the middle because it's folded there, and you need a way to kind of separate that. So I'm just breaking apart the ones that I want to use. It might be hard to see these on the video because the text is gold on the green, but you can read them very well in person. I don't love these as embellishments, mostly because they're very hard to store. Once you start tearing them apart like this, you end up with all these little pieces that are different sizes, whereas word phrase strip stickers, you have them on a backer, so it's very easy to like pull ones here and there out. I decided to add one of those on the title card and then add a geotag from my stash just to give it a little bit more decor. I am obsessed with geotags as embellishments. I love them, especially for travel spreads, and I do a lot of travel and a lot of travel documenting, and I can never get enough of them. So if you know of any geotag embellishments out there to purchase, I would love them because I frequently search like scrapbook.com and stuff and find pretty much nothing. Like that puffy geotag that I have there, that's just perfect. So anyways, I'm moving on to my journaling. I decided to do just one simple journal card on this spread, and I'm using this details one that was from the collection. I am going to use these in my album that I'm going to create using this collection, but I decided to do one for like each day. And because the kit didn't come with that many, I'm going to actually use the digital versions, and I might even type my journaling on them and print them out to make that process more streamlined and allow me to edit my text. So for these spreads, I have all of those cards available because I'm not going to use the physical ones in my travel album. I could obviously mix and match digital and physical in the same album, but because I was doing some digital, I figured it was just easier to do them all digital and make sure they all match, and that gives me the opportunity to type on them. Anyway, so for this card, I just did a bullet point list, and for each bullet, I'm just kind of writing a summary of each day, and I'm just using my journal as a reference point to remember what we did on each day, and I'm just putting a couple things like the highlights from the day. Like I said, I document my travel in 4 different places. So when it comes to project life, I'm not too concerned about putting the overall story or any of those micro stories from the vacation. Sometimes I will just because I feel like it, but I like taking that pressure off because I know I'm going to document this trip in way more detail in my travel album someday. So that will be where all of those longer stories go, all the ephemera that I collected. Of course, the ephemera that I didn't use in my journal, but I kind of have just like these set rules for myself to make it easier when documenting travel, because doing travel, especially in something like Project Life, usually takes a lot longer than a regular Project Life spread because you always have so many photos to choose from, a lot more stories to tell, and there's just a lot more going on. So for me, I find these spreads to be a little bit more complicated, which is part of the reason why this video is a little bit longer than some of my previous ones. You can see me writing here from my journal. You can see some of my journal pages. If you're more interested in seeing my journal, I will share travel and document with me videos. If you haven't seen those, I share those for most of my travel destinations, and I show me journaling on the road and a little bit of my travel as well. I also will share flip through videos of my Hobonichi cousin every month. So if you want to see these spreads that happened in October, that will be in my October flip through video, which will be coming soon this month in November. For the travel and document with me ones, I'm not sure when those videos are going to come out. I'm kind of behind in editing those. They take a lot of time to edit and share, and I do get a lot of positive feedback on them, but they just get a lot fewer views than some of my other videos, probably because I'm primarily a craft YouTuber, not a travel YouTuber, but it's kind of my merging crafting and traveling. So I don't know. I enjoy them. I like having them as a record, so I do intend to keep doing them. I like filming them while we're traveling. I've really just gotten in the habit of it, and it helps motivate me to journal on the road. But at the same time, those videos do pile up. So eventually they will come out for these destinations. I do have one that I recently shared for my vacation to Quebec City. So if you are interested to see what type of information is shared in those videos, you can check that one out. And I do have a playlist of all of the destinations that I've shared so far, which are a lot of interesting places. I feel like I get to go a lot of places. When I was younger, I didn't get to travel that much because I didn't have that much money, and I was in school for a really long time. I'm a lawyer, which takes a very long time of college, so I didn't really get to travel, and now I'm kind of making up for that lost time. Anyway, back to my spread. I went over to my stash and pulled over some white word phrase strips to pair with some of those green perforated strips, just as a repeated embellishment. Because a spread like this has so much going on in the photos, I don't want to do too much embellishing. I want to let the photos kind of speak for themselves, especially because I had so many photos to choose from. I have some photos that I absolutely love. I did add one of the labels from the kit to that photo that I just stuck in the pocket behind the flap because I wanted to list where that place was, because that is one of the few things that I think I might forget what location that photo was taken at, because it's a little more of a close-up of an area that's not really that famous. A lot of these other photos were taken at Sagrada Familia, like the close-up there of the text, that's one of the doors. and I don't really want to put any journaling or anything on there. I don't think I'm going to forget where that photo was taken, and I will document that somewhere else. I'm going through my chipboard stash here. I pulled out the tray of all of my travel themed chipboard because I wanted to put a piece of chipboard right on top of that photo. If you're interested in how I organize my chipboard, I do have a video for that, so I will link that in the description box below. And now I'm just moving on to kind of slipping things in the pocket as I go. So as I document project life, I typically don't slip things in the pocket as I go because I like to move them around. But for a spread like this where there's so much going on, I am slipping things in the pocket, especially with that one with the flip out, because I want them to kind of stay in place and give me a little bit more space to work. I'm looking for word phrase strips that make sense. So the green ones that came in the travel collection are obviously travel themed, so they work really well for a lot of my photos. I was looking for a white word phrase strips sticker set in my stash that was travel themed. I couldn't find one, but I found some that were for like summer months, which is kind of when a lot of people travel. So there were some travel sentiments or some general sentiments that would work really well. So I'm using those. But that's why I pulled over a few different pieces of or pads of word phrase strips or sheets, that's the word I'm looking for, of word phrase strips, because I wasn't sure that many of those would actually work. I think I also pulled over a food related one because I can use that on the photo of my paella. So for this card here with the heart on it, the transparent piece, I am thinking about writing the word Marrakesh on the back. So I'm just kind of testing that out to see if it works. And I think it does, where you don't really see it through that much. And I just wanted to test that out before I put this in the pocket and kind of committed to it in this location. If that didn't work, I was probably going to do something else here that wasn't transparent. But it seems like it's going to work. So I'm excited about that. And it's kind of a start on that Marrakesh spread. I don't believe that I'm going to be using this collection for the Marrakesh spread. But you'll see when that video comes out how I end up working that in. At the point that I am filming this voiceover, I have not yet put that spread together, so I really don't know how it's going to come together. I have this photo of me here in Park Gael, and I wanted to add a little bit of embellishment to it. So in my travel spreads, I like to make sure to include a mixture of photos of me, of us, and of stuff. Most of the photos I take are obviously of locations rather than me or of people, because there's just a lot going on, a lot to see, to take photos of. And, we don't travel with other people. So getting photos of the two of us isn't super common. We have to ask people to take photos, which of course we do. And then taking photos of each other, we do that as well. So I wanted to include at least one photo of me. I think this is the favorite one I got. Unfortunately, I didn't get great photos of me because, well, in Barcelona is fine, but most of this vacation I was kind of sick with a cold. So I feel like that makes me just not quite as photogenic as I normally would be. But I'm happy with some of my photos, and I'm really happy with a lot of the photos I took that don't have people in them. And so I'm happy to have some of those favorites in this spread. Here's a photo of my paella. It's hard to kind of select to do a photo of food for a travel spread when I have so many beautiful photos of destinations, but I really loved the paella. It was a highlight of the destination, and that's why I chose to include this photo. I also wanted just a mixture of different types of photos. So this is between two iconic kind of destinations, and I think that helps balance out the spread. Here's a completed look at the layout with the flap closed and then one with the flap open, so you can get a feel for everything that I was able to include on this spread. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, I hope to see you guys on the next one. Bye.